Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the ScruffyMovies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
Today, we are actually back in the same room again. We hope you guys enjoyed last week's, but it was kind of strange. It was a bit of a change of format and pace, but we are back in the same room again. And you know, today we're going to be talking about something. There's great trilogies abound in Hollywood. And I know you think like the original Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. And then we just started thinking about these cinematic masterpieces, and we were like, well, we need to do an episode on those.
Yeah.
And that would be the Austin Powers trilogy.
Absolutely. I mean, the creme de la creme when it comes to trilogies in Hollywood.
When it comes to comedy trilogies about secret spies starring Mike Myers.
Yep.
They are like the best.
the absolute pinnacle.
And just to let you guys know, this is also going to be a little bit of a change of format. We actually grabbed some new ideas from last week, and Crocker and I have both thought of what we think a cool Austin Powers 4 would be individually. And here at the end of the podcast, after we kind of shoot the breeze on all the Austin Powers movies, we're going to pitch each other our Austin Powers 4 ideas and see what we have to think about them. Just something kind of new and interesting, and that'll be coming up at the end. But first, we got to dig into these movies.
Yeah, switch up the style a little bit there at the end. I like it.
Yes. So I'm going to kick it over to you, just like I always do, just like I said I was going to do before we started recording.
Moments ago. Okay, so my question to you is, out of all of the Mike Myers characters, which one do you like the most? Or which one do you think is the best?
Well, I think probably the one that I think is the funniest is the one I quote the most is Fat Bastard.
Absolutely. Same as me.
Same answer. A million quotes from him all the time. Still even now, I'm like, get in my belly. And I sing like the Chili's theme song in the way he does it. And then if something weird happens, I'm like, oh, getting frisky, are we?
Getting frisky.
Like there's just a million, like every quote he has is killer.
The Subway diet jokes used to be good too until Jared from Subway actually did some bad things in real life.
And then it's like,
maybe we let those jokes lie.
Yeah, and then if I fart, I'm like, oh, sorry, I farted. There's just so many good ones.
You can do the Scottish accent. I can't even try. So I can't whip those out as easily as you can.
Oh, I do them. I do it all the time. He is the most quotable character, I think.
Yeah, definitely the most quotable character. One of the most memorable characters as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that he hung around too, because they brought him back for the third one.
Yeah, I'm glad he wasn't just like a henchman and then he was gone.
Right.
Which is funny because like all the Mike Myers characters, it seems like in these movies, are even if they're minuscule in the parts that they get brought back for the next one no matter what. Mike Myers is like, well, I like playing that guy.
Yeah, well, I'm getting paid to be here anyway.
Yeah,
might as well add a little bit of depth.
Let's have 5 of them.
Yeah, exactly. You know what blows my mind about these movies more than anything, and I think this is probably a great place to really kind of start, is just how old they are. Like, it blows my mind that Austin Powers, the first one came out in 97, the second one came out in 99, and the third one came out in 2002. And I've said this before. You are around me in my daily life, so you've heard me say this. But for everyone out there on the interwebs, I distinctly remember watching Austin Powers when he's driving in the Jaguar, and Basil's face comes on in the dashboard, and they're talking back and forth through like camera and audio and everything else. And I distinctly remember thinking to myself, right, that will never, ever happen in our lifetime. To be able to drive your car down the road and video chat with somebody that's across the globe, like, yeah, sure, we can call each other, but video conferencing, definitely not going to happen that easily, that quick. And here we are where FaceTime might as well, like, replace cell phone calls, for a lot of people nowadays.
Yeah, Crocker and I work in an industry where we have to get on, like basically Skype calls, video chat calls.
Yep, every day. And I was just thinking about it. I was in a video chat call the other day with like 4 people on my side, and I was like, man, this is crazy. Yep. Like we're living in the future. I would have even in like
Kim Possible and stuff, when she whipped out her phone and started talking to Wade, I was like, Psh, no way.
Never
I was
gonna
like,
happen.
yeah, that's awesome. I wish I could video talk with somebody, but never gonna happen.
I know. Now I'll be on a call with someone who, it'll be storming where I'm at or something, raining heavily, and then I hear on the other side of the phone that they're like on their front porch with the birds chirping in the background, and like the birds chirping and the crickets are so loud, like it disrupts the phone call. And I just think to myself, wow, here we are living in Austin Powers world.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, like, with limited, as long as your Wi-Fi connection's good, like, there's really no issues with video chat calling.
No.
I remember, like, when it first started, it used to be like, well, your internet had to kind of catch up to the technology.
Yeah.
So they would freeze every once in a while, and then it would, like, you could hear their voice, and then it would load very quickly and jump back into the video. But now it's like, no, you just hop on, boom. It's just like the person's in the room with you.
Yeah, now there are actually probably laws against video chatting while driving.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there are.
Like
Austin Powers would be arrested. There would be no Austin Powers movies.
Exactly. Exactly. Or at least they would have to find a way around him being able to break the law. I don't know, maybe if you're an international man of mystery, you don't have to follow different countries' rules.
Oh, no, he's not above the law.
You don't think so?
No, he probably is.
Yeah, I think you might be.
But speaking of childhood and how these movies affected us when we were children, I remember Austin Powers merchandise was everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was Austin Powers Central when these movies were coming out. So the one action figure my mother refused to buy me was Fat Bastard because it said bastard on the box. She refused to buy that for me, and that was like the number one I wanted. But I had Mini-Me, Dr. Evil, Austin Powers. I had Dr. Evil's from like the first movie, from the second movie where he's in his astronaut outfit. Like, I had them all. And I remember going to my church after school, having brought them all. And one of the action figures I had is Austin seducing the fembots to explode at the end of the first movie. So he's just wearing his like British tighty whities, and he's like full hair chest, like it had a real, like they had glued hair on it. And I was playing with it because I just didn't know any better. I was like, cool, Austin Powers. I like Austin Powers. And so I was playing with it at church, basically, and a woman probably like in her 50s walked up, and she was like, oh my God! And she like took it away from me. She thought I was playing with like sex dolls and stuff.
I can honestly say I don't know if I had many, if any, of the actual like toys and product and different things they had out there branded with Austin Powers stuff. I was never really big into like getting toys from movies unless it was like superheroes or like Power Rangers or something like that, back in those days.
No, I like to mix and match. So mine would be like the Power Rangers versus like Little Nicky.
Yeah.
Like I had a bunch of Little Nicky action figures too. Like I would go to Hot Topic instead of Toys R Us and be like, hey.
Totally sounds like a Spencer's or a Hot Topic purchase.
Yeah.
Like I don't think you can just go find naked Austin Powers and Little Nicky dolls.
There was a place in the mall, it closed down, but the mall near my house called KB Toys, and they had a very small, basically like one tiny section of the aisle of like adult collectors figures, but I was like, I'm gonna play with that. And like you're not supposed to play with them.
Right.
I had an Edward Scissorhands action figure that you were supposed to like put on a stand and display.
Keep it in the box.
He fought the Power Rangers a lot.
Which, too, back in these days, and it's hard to remember back to the late 90s, early 2000s, but I would also say this was like the first time that like fashion and everything from the 60s really started to come back around too.
Yeah.
Like this was the time where everyone was wearing like bell bottoms again. And, you really saw a lot of those 60s tropes coming back around in just everyday society. And I think Austin Powers just timed itself perfectly with that. So any product they put out there, to support the movie was actually sort of in vogue as well, almost, especially things other than action figures and all of that.
Yeah, I think it kind of happens once every couple of decades or so. You get like halfway through a decade and people are like, I don't like the way this decade's going. So they just reach for something like from their childhood. And I guess for adults in the 90s, it was the 60s.
Because think about it. All we have from our generation, legitimately, cargo shorts and graphic tees.
And that's like all I wear now.
What else do we have?
I hit like 5th grade and I was like, I'm good. And
yeah.
I never changed my style. I was like, I found it.
Yeah, I pretty much just do like collared shirts instead of graphic tees, you know?
Yeah.
But it's crazy how most every other generation, or maybe it's because it's our generation and we feel like there's nothing to it because it's ours. But if you look back at the 60s, I mean, fashion abounded back then, you know,
Yeah.
big hair, bell bottoms.
Yeah.
70s was crazy with the mustaches and the blue jean one pieces and
Yeah.
all that. The 80s were freaking parachute pants and bright neon colors and vanilla ice. And then in the 90s, it was cargo shorts and graphic tees. And that's us.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that has to do with what Hollywood or like what is remembered most from that decade.
Yeah.
And I think the 90s might still be a little close. Now it's a huge resurgence of the 90s. Like right now, we're at right now, people are wearing like, you can walk into any store. They have like old Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network shirts. Yeah. They have, I mean, like Full House is back on air. They're making Jurassic Park movies. There's new Dumb and Dumbers coming out.
That's true.
I mean, like we have not, and maybe that's kind of like why we don't think of our childhood as something from like a far off, forgotten era, because most people were holding on to their childhoods like in the 60s and 70s and stuff. And then when they got to the 80s, they were like, my childhood, everything's changed so much. Whereas 90 kids were like, no, it's mine.
It's mine.
And we never let go.
We have unfinished business. We must continue making all the movies.
That's what, and we never let go, to the point now where it's like a huge thing in Hollywood. All like these big, like they just had and when I was a kid, if you looked at me and said, you see Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, that's going to get a gritty reboot in 2016, $150 million budget. I'd be like, yeah, okay.
Right.
It's the same as video chat. I would not believe you. And it did.
Totally.
It was pretty good.
You know, everyone tells me that it was decent, but I still need to go back and rewatch that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. And now they're like everything's coming back. They just had a Hey Arnold movie come on. They're doing a Rocko's Modern Life movie.
What? All these must be TV movies.
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, they're bringing like everything back. Nickelodeon is apparently doing a Nicktoons movie that's going to be in the vein of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where the Nicktoons cartoons have to come together with real life people to help like stop something or do something.
That'd be badass.
Yeah, and see, that's what I'm saying. Like us 90s kids, we never let go. You and I are sitting here talking about cartoons right now.
So it doesn't take being cryogenically frozen for us to
remember
and want to hold on. We just never let go. So out of the 3 Austin Powers movies, getting this back around to the topic at hand here, out of the 3, which is your favorite to watch and which is the better movie?
I think probably the best movie is the first one, just because that introduced everything. It had a lot of good jokes, and in 2 and 3, the jokes are funny, but they do repeat a lot of jokes. Yeah. But it's for comedy, but they do repeat a lot of jokes. Whereas in the first one, you're seeing them for the first time. So I would say maybe the first one is the best one from like an outsider's point of view, like stepping back and just trying to look at them. Probably the first one. But the third one is the best one by far, I think. I love Goldmember.
That's probably, I'm either exactly with you or just the opposite. I think that the first movie is by far my favorite movie. Like, it's...
Yeah, I knew you were going to say it too, because you like origin stories.
Always the first movie. But the Austin Powers first movie really was, like, I mean, to me, it is the greatest Austin Powers movie for sure, and definitely my favorite. And then in the second one, it was, again, we've talked about this before, and I can't remember what movies we've talked about this with, but the whole, like, still in the mojo thing and, like, weak Austin for a while. And we talked about this with Spider-Man when he kind of lost his powers. Yeah. Like, I just don't like that. That unsettles me when that is a plot point. And they use it. That's something that's used quite often in movies.
Yeah, it really is.
Something like that. So it comes up for me a lot. But I was uncomfortable with it then. I'm uncomfortable with it now. I don't like the still in the mojo thing. The rest of the movie was okay. And then the third one is probably like the best Hollywood movie. Like, it definitely had the best production value. It was the cleanest and clearest. Yeah, by far the most cameos.
Britney Spears and Steven Spielberg in the first 5 minutes.
And I mean, the entire movie wrapped up with there was a third one that wrapped up with Tom Cruise and Danny DeVito and all them. So like the third movie was definitely the highest budget, prettiest looking movie. But like you said, the jokes in it just fell flat. Like, it wasn't as funny. It was a better movie to watch on TV, but it wasn't as hilarious and just rolling on the floor laughing like the first one was.
See, I think, and it's probably something to do with, I loved watching special features when I was a kid. I still do now, but it has to be like the right thing. The third movie came with a new thing New Line Cinema was trying to like put out on their DVDs called Infinifilm. And it was basically like every aspect of the movie, every interesting scene, everything is covered in the special features. Whatever you want to look at, we got it.
Right.
And so I just remember plowing through. I mean, there's like hours of special features on that Goldmember DVD. And I just remember plowing through that when I was a kid and just watching it over and over and over. Especially they had like a behind-the-scenes feature of when they flash back and they did young Austin, young Dr. Evil in like that preparatory academy. They had a whole like 15 minutes special feature on that I watched all the time. I think that the third movie is the best for me, and I remember it the most seeing it the first time because I remember my friend's like uncle or something who lived down the street from him had a burned DVD of it, like someone had recorded it in the theater and had burned it, and I was like, oh my god, dude. I was like, we got to go over there and watch that. And he was like, yeah, let's go watch it. And so we went and we put it in the DVD player and we clicked it in and the movie started and it's just somebody filming it in the theater. Oh, yeah. And I was like, whoa, I was like, this is crazy. This movie hasn't even come out on DVD yet, but here I am watching it in the house. This is the future. and I remember when it started and then it turned, like Tom Cruise turned around and it was like Tom Cruise is Austin Powers. I was like, man, I like stopped the movie. I was like, this is janky. This isn't Goldmember. This is some weird, like somebody put Tom Cruise as Austin Powers. This isn't the movie.
They got some 2-bit Tom Cruise
standing
in as Mike Myers.
And I was like, oh, Kevin Spacey and Danny DeVito as Dr. Evil and Mini-Me? Who cares? What are you talking about? Where's Mike Myers?
I remember being confused the first time I saw that because I don't think I was old enough to realize exactly what was going on. I knew the movies were satirical and I knew that they were poking fun at all of the, Bonds and spy movies and espionage movies over the decades. But when they started poking fun at their own industry is when I think I wasn't quite privy enough at the time to understand what was going on.
That was the same as me as well. I remember like being like, well, turn this off. This isn't even Goldmember. Why are we watching this? This isn't. And then it like zoomed out of the screen. I was like, oh, okay.
That makes sense now. Yeah.
Yeah, but like that first 5 minutes, I was like, what is this? I was like, this guy recorded the wrong movie. I was so mad at his uncle who I'd never met, who was kind enough to invite me into his home and show me this movie for free.
Oh, man.
I was so mad at him.
I just remember these being, like, some of the most hilarious movies that existed, like, when Will Ferrell and all them started coming out with some of their, like, more hilarious movies. Like, if you wanted to just laugh, and watch a movie that you knew everybody owned and everybody could watch, for the most part, I think for the majority of our childhood, this movie was really sort of like the comedic masterpiece, or this series of movies. There really wasn't a whole lot out at the time that was as I don't think slapsticky is the best word for it, but is like in your face comedy wise. Yeah. And now I guess you could look back at other things like Wayne's World and all that.
Yeah, Wayne's World was
because it totally was on par with it. But even then, like I didn't watch Wayne's World or any of those other movies as much as I watched this one.
Yeah, this was definitely my repertoire of like the cool movie guy when I was a kid, of being like, have you seen Austin Powers? And if somebody said no, I'd be like, well, then I know what we're doing at this sleepover tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
That was in my repertoire. I had like 5 or 6 movies that would be like, hey guys, are your parents asleep? And I'd like look around and like move all of the children's movies out of my book bag that I brought as a cover and take out like American Pie Presents Band Camp, and everyone in the room would be like, oh my god, how did you get that?
But even that was a lot longer after. I mean, the first American Pie movie didn't come out until after these, right?
Yeah, it came out in 99.
Right, so by the time Band Camp came along, we're 5, 6 years.
Yeah, it was like 2005 or so.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking back like Wayne's World, Dumb and Dumber, like that's the class I put Austin Powers in, which is weird.
Billy Madison.
Yes, all the
movies.
Happy Madison production movies. Because for a while there, it was like comedy was sort of forging its own way. Like when the Billy Madison stuff came out, it was just different types of comedy. When this came out, it was a different type of comedy. Like it wasn't your dad's comedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember I was watching like a how SNL came to be what we know it to be type documentary.
Right.
And when Adam Sandler auditioned to be on SNL, he did his like, whoo, chibbidi-boo, chibbidi-boo. And the dude who'd been running SNL since the 70s looked at him and he was like, that guy's not funny. But then like he looked and I think like his kids were there and they were teenagers and they were like on the floor laughing, dying. And he was like, He's like, that's weird. Maybe I'll give him a shot. And then he got famous from doing that, like, shibbity-boo.
Yep.
And that was, like, what you're saying. That's, like, the new type of comedy. I could show my dad Billy Madison, and he might laugh at a few things, but mostly he's like, why aren't we watching Caddyshack? Why aren't we watching Porky's?
Exactly.
Why aren't we watching something like that? Like, if I showed my dad Wayne's World, he'd be like, this is corny. This is cheesy. I don't like this.
Yeah.
But, like, those were the movies that really helped form comedy in the 90s, like those SNL alum type comedies.
And I think it's because they were targeted to the demographic of the time, which was us.
Yeah, they were targeted. And as much as they want to say, oh, they're PG-13, they're for like teenagers and adults, they were targeted to children. A lot of them. Yeah. Otherwise, why would they have Austin Powers action figures for collectors? I don't know any collector that would like Austin Powers enough to go buy a naked Austin action figure.
That's true.
But a kid who likes the movies enough to be like, I'm going to play with that. Yeah, I would buy it.
Imagine now, imagine the trouble they would get into if they tried to sell like fembots.
Oh, I know.
You know?
I know. And that's kind of, I don't know when we're going to jump into our pitch ideas, but that is something that I kind of hit on in my Austin Powers 4.
Well, we're already almost to the halfway mark of the episode, so we'll do one more question and then we'll dive into the ideas. So, what is your favorite, or I guess favorite's the best word. What's your favorite like nod to old Bond movies and old spy movies from Austin Powers?
Definitely the entire last half of the second movie when they're on the moon.
On the moon.
And it's just like totally, and I love like the old spacesuits. I love when Dr. Evil gets shot in the leg and he clicks on his little voice thing, and he's like, that hurt! And he clicks it off, and then he clicks it back on. He's like, you a-hole! And he clicks it back off again. But I love that entire, like, second movie's ending.
Scene. Yeah. I think probably my favorite thing that happened in any of the Austin Powers movies was the oddball knockoff where he threw the shoe instead of the hat.
Who throws
a shoe? I can't tell you how many shoes got lobbed around my high school or my middle school.
Even like it doesn't do anything. People just like get hit in the head with a shoe, and he's like, "Ow!" Like somebody threw a shoe.
But going back to your point, I appreciate, and I think that it adds a deeper layer to like much like when the new Star Wars movies came out. And they made everything look like, as far as the command center and like all the buttons and the lights all look the same as the old Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Like I love that on the moon base and in the submarine and like the volcano layer, like you have all these henchmen that like act like they're doing something and they're using all these big machines with levers and buttons and lights, and it looks just like stuff from the 1960s like espionage films.
Right.
You know, like they really nailed the look and feel. And then just on top of that, you sprinkle in the shenanigans that are happening in that setting. But, you know, put different actors in a room, and it could have just as easily been from any serious spy movie. Yeah. You know, I think, which is awesome. Except for maybe the sharks with the laser beams in the corner.
Oh, no, I think that fits in perfectly with, like, 60s Bond movies. They got crazy. Like the 60s and 70s.
There was one Bond movie that had shark tanks.
Who is his name? Roger Moore, I think, was Bond back then.
Yeah.
And he caught a lot of flack, too, for he didn't just give up the role after a couple movies. He stayed on for, like, 15 years. Yeah. And people were like, it's getting crazy, man. Give it up. And he's like, I'm going to do another one on the moon. And they were like, no, this is what we want.
Roger Moore was the one that, in the middle of his stint, someone else came in. Daltrey came in and did a couple.
Yeah, he did, or he did one.
like right in the middle of
Yeah,
more
Timothy
shit.
Dalton did one.
If we're screwing this up, the Bond people are gonna be real upset.
I'm almost positive because I remember them talking about it on the Hot Fuzz commentary because Timothy Dalton's in that.
I'll receive a text message on Monday as soon as this goes live if we've screwed up any Bond information. But I'm pretty sure that he was the one that like halfway through they were like, no, we're just gonna give this other guy a chance. And then he still came back around.
Yeah, and then he's like, you know what? I'll come back.
Yep.
I mean, there's been a lot of weird ones with like Sean Connery too, even where he's like was done for 10 years, then came back and just did a weird one where it was like based off of a novel, not technically in the James Bond universe, but it is.
I forget what they call those. There's basically like one's in canon and one's in not.
Yeah.
You know,
and Sean Connery definitely came back for one that was not in canon.
Right. So I think that's a good enough segue as any to roll over into some of our thoughts and ideas on a future one. What do you say?
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to go first because I know that I have nowhere near the amount of details that you do, and maybe we'll do like we did last week and actually like compliment each other so well that I'm basically just setting the scene for which your plot may take place.
By the way, before we start this, give it up to Crocker. If you guys watched the entire podcast last week, he went 3 for 3 on my answers. He mixed up 2 that I had answered switched, but he went 3 for 3, nailed all 3 of my answers. And I messaged him as soon as I heard it, and I saw him in person. I was like, dude, did you get my message? And he was like, no, what's up? I was like, you got all 3. I was like, you nailed 3 for 3.
You may be just a little bit predictable.
See, but that was my thing because, and I even remember when I went in to edit the episode, I was like, no way he got like any of mine. I roll so deep in movie knowledge. No way he like got even close. And you nailed 3 for 3, and I got one of yours on a shot in the dark.
Well, you were dancing all around mine too. Like you spent at least a couple of minutes like saying that it might be the Santa Claus, and then I spent a couple of minutes saying that I almost picked the Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. And if it were like if I would have just woke up on the other side of the bed that morning, you'd have been right.
Yeah.
You know.
And
totally.
Matt, the one I got was a total shot in the dark. I was like, I don't know. I was like,
based on his personality.
Yeah, I was like, Crocker seems like he'd like Christmas Vacation. Let's go with that.
Totally. 100%. All right. So I'm just going to throw a lot out at you, and it's probably not going to be in order at all. Okay. So first thing that has to happen is the setting. Mm-hmm. And in all of my ideas that I'm about to throw at you, I realized that really the last Austin Powers movies came out as the last Pierce Brosnan James Bonds dropped.
Ended, yeah.
So since then we've had four
Daniel Craig
James Bonds. So my idea is to basically satirically poke more fun at the movies that have happened since the last Austin Powers movie. So we're going to be focusing very heavily on the Daniel Craig James Bond movies as far as like influence here. And if there's one thing that's always happened in Bond movies, but my goodness happens in the new ones more than it ever has, is they just bounce around where they're at. In a single Bond movie, like in just a few of the little like reviews I was reading, he went to Haiti, the Bahamas, Austria, somewhere in the desert, Russia, Istanbul, Shanghai, Mexico, Rome, and that was like in the first half of, just the first half of it. So they're all over the place. Now, we've had some really stereotypical locations in Austin Powers before, like the submarine, the water base, the moon base, the volcano layer. Mm-hmm. So I think in this one, they just need to be all over like every time the new scene starts in a different part of the world. Just comedically all over the place. And make it funny too, and everything is obviously going to be in the lens of comedy and Austin Powers, which I'm not going to be able to put here because I'm just not that good. But you got to have a big snow level, because in a couple of the Austin Powers, or in a couple of the Bond movies recently, especially when they went to like the big headquarters, I forget what the name of it was. It was a huge like snow desert looking thing. Mm-hmm. So I think you definitely got to bring that back. I think that there's a few sort of key things that happen that we could poke fun at in each of the Bond movies. So for Casino Royale, it was obviously like the playing poker was a big part of that, you know? So I think that they allude to the card playing, but make it Austin Powersy, so make it like dog racing or something silly, like something that you can bet on, but like nobody really should be betting on, but just put like way too much emphasis on it,
In the first movie when he was playing poker against a lot of vagina.
Yeah. Well, that was actually, referring back to a lot of the earlier Bond movies, but Casino Royale sort of like doubled down on the James Bond as a poker star thing, So I think we doubled down on the like betting in an unfamiliar environment. Because even in the Bond movie, they're in like Monaco where they're using the big cards instead of chips, and like it's still a different feel. So I think do something with that. I think that Basil, who is basically M, like definitely is going to play a big part, because M played a huge part in the recent movies.
Yeah.
Between
Skyfall
specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to go back to Powers Manor. I think that could be a big part of it, and that Bond was also sort of framed in Quantum of Solace. So I think that like if you take him getting framed and you take the thing out of, I think it was Skyfall as well, where the other agent doesn't get a clear shot, so she shoots him. So if you basically roll in the fact that like Bond gets framed, Bond gets injured, Bond goes away disappears, act like he's dead, turn all that into Austin Powers, and then have Basil actually be the one that's like, hey, you need to just like turn in your badge and your gun and leave, and eventually wind up back at Powers Manor and potentially have Basil like get killed and do all of that. I think that would be really huge. Foxy needs to be the one that shoots Austin when she can't get a clear shot. I just want to see Beyonce back in a freaking Austin Powers movie. I think given a second shot at being in a movie that could be as good as the first would be very cool for that character. Because I think she did a great job as the character.
I think she did too.
Like, I have no complaints with her. But I think that there needs to be a scene, which is like one of my favorite scenes in the new James Bond movies, in Skyfall again, because that is my favorite newest Bond movie.
So as it is a lot of people's, because it blew everybody out of the water.
It was a great movie.
Like 20 plus movies in, and you bring Skyfall to the table.
When he rescues M, which would be Austin rescuing Basil, and then they jump back in the old DB9 Aston Martin, and he's like, this is so old that they won't be able to track it. You could do so much with that from Powers coming back from the 60s and having like old equipment that's non-trackable, and we live in a world now that's way more technologically advanced than even the last Austin Powers.
I like that.
So like you could really play with that a little bit, I think, as well. And then Scott is definitely going to be the bad guy now, because Austin and Dr. Evil kind of like made up at the end of the last movie.
And they're cool now.
And then Scott was basically like going to be the big baddie at the end of that one. So I think he kind of comes back as the big bad guy. But then again, at the end of Spectre, you see, what's his name? Blofeld, which was who Dr. Evil was supposed to be modeled after to begin with. So I think there's a lot you could play around there with that. And then to sort of wrap it up, I would say that, Scott, the bad guy, his thing was that he brought Dr. Evil sharks with laser beams on their heads to try and impress him. So I think that he should double down on that and make that like one of the big weapons. But because, again, the world we live in where like climate change is a big deal, you could have it to where when the world floods, the sharks are actually going to be able to get like everywhere they need to get to, and instead
he
of
wants to like melt the polar ice caps to flood the world,
which was sort of the failed Preparation H,
yeah,
which was supposed to be the tractor beam that like melted the ice caps or whatever, brought the meteor in. So I say he's the big bad guy. Sharks are the main thing we're worried about, and the most important thing of all is that it would have to drop in 2020. Because that's when the next Bond movie is scheduled to drop, and they always drop the same year as a Bond movie drops. So that's pretty much my like all of the parallels that I think I could draw that would be fun to play off of if you were directing a new James Bond movie, or not a new Austin Powers movie. So now we put your plot in with all of that and see what we get.
Okay, well, we do have one thing in common that we brought to the table in pitching, and that was that I wanted to also make fun of the Daniel Craig movies. I think that we've kind of gone as far as we can on like the 60s and 70s stuff. I think it's interesting to still see Austin Powers as like a man displaced.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Austin living in modern days would not get it. So yours was a lot of details of what you'd want to do in the movie. Mine is more or less like a story.
That's what I was hoping for.
With like what I kind of would want to see happen. So basically, after the end of the third movie, they kept making like Austin Powers movies, like what Steven Spielberg was directing, and the market just kind of became oversaturated with Austin Powers. He lost his touch. They're big like with the Me Too movement happening in Hollywood. Austin was kind of like, we don't know if we like the way you talk to people anymore, and he just couldn't understand it. He didn't know why. And he wasn't like getting the cases at work he wanted to. Now it's all these people. Austin's like, they're like, we got to get into this guy's laboratory because we got to steal these plans. And Austin's like, no problem. I'll get this submarine. It'll take me 5 days. I'll go do this. And somebody right in front of him is like, boom, hacked it. Got the plans. Plans are downloading now. Austin's just a man displaced. He doesn't understand where we live now. So he retires from the agency. He doesn't want to work there anymore. He's like, you know what? I'm done with this. It's over. People don't respect me anymore. I'm just going to live the rest of my life. And so he goes back to his house, and he's done. He doesn't want to do anything else. He's done.
Powers Manor. Yeah,
he goes back to Powers Manor, and he's over with. And then he hears the familiar time travel outside. He doesn't know what it is. He looks outside very quick. He sees a man jump through a portal, but he's shrouded in shadows. You don't know who he is. Austin takes out his gun, and this is when we start seeing Austin Powers a little differently. He's funny, but he is an agent. He's a secret agent. So, and this is not really like going to be the whole movie. It's not a serious movie by any means, but it would be a cool scene to see Austin like kind of stalking through his house, looking for people. And then we see the person come in. Austin's like, who are you? And he's like, put down the gun. Please, please, please put down the gun. And he's like, I said, who are you? And then we see him step out of the shadows into the light, and it is Chris Pratt. And he's dressed super secret agent man, black tie, black suit. And he's like, it's me, Dad. I'm your son. Felicity Shagwell, who we haven't seen since the second movie, decided that the modern day wasn't life for her, which we saw her kind of having some troubles with in the second movie. So she decides to take the time travel machine back to the 60s. Little does she know, she's pregnant with Austin's baby. She raises him in the 60s. He becomes a super agent who is always been behind the scenes of Austin's missions, more or less, helping him out, doing like the actual spy work while Austin is like having fun, being like the cool, smooth guy.
Right.
And so he now has traveled from the future back to present day, and he's like, something's gone wrong. When you retired, it all ended, basically. And what is set up is kind of lampooning some Marvel superhero movies. Austin's agency has been infiltrated since the very beginning. And Basil is the Red Skull of the operation. He is the one who, since the beginning, has been trying to like ruin things and keep stuff down. And so when Austin left, Basil was like, that was the one dude who had his eye on me. Now that he's gone, it's time to start my final plan. So by Austin retiring, and this, keep in mind, Austin just retired in present day like 2 days ago. Right. So nothing's happened yet. But in the future, where Chris Pratt, his son, is coming from, it's all gone to hell. So Chris Pratt's like, we've got to stop him. And so they go on a time travel adventure together, father and son, finding all the different points in time where Basil has spent like forming his plan to end the world, basically. And they have to stop it. And along the way, Austin learns to become modern, and Chris Pratt learns to become a little bit more like the 60s, leaving them both in like a mixture of the Austin Powers we love now with the Austin Powers of what the future could hold. And that would set up at the end, if Mike Myers wanted to hand the torch to Chris Pratt to keep the Austin Powers franchise going as his son, he could.
I like it. There's a few things you did there that I really like. Time travel for sure, because that was a huge underlying theme of like the other movies, to the point where it was even hard to keep up with sometimes, like who came from what era and where they're at now and how that changes what's going on. So I think actually have we seen Austin Powers go into the future yet in the movie? So I dig that. That's huge. I really like that because you keep that same pattern of time travel in all the other movies, but you actually push it forward going into the future. And then I love that you just hit the nail on the head of like what it would be like for Austin Powers, someone from the 60s, to be in the middle of the world we live in now with all the social justice-y Me Too stuff and like, you know, you want to shag, baby.
Yeah,
it's not something you
he
can
would
just say.
Yeah, baby. And they'd be like, ew, get out of my coffee shop.
Or just trying to seduce him at like every single turn. And, you know, he would employ things like fembots that would just be so totally against everything, you know, going on today in Hollywood. So I love the fact that the movie could almost be used almost like comedians are doing now, where they're like, hey, let's talk about how crazy things have gotten. Like, let's just see, like, let's actually have a conversation about this. Yeah. So Austin Powers would be the perfect person because he is transplanted from a time where all of that was just the norm.
Yeah. But he is also inherently likable. And none of that stuff is coming from a bad place for him. You even see in the first movie, he's like, Vanessa's drunk. And she's like, have sex with me. And he's like, no, you're drunk. Right. So you could, like, he doesn't want to take advantage of people. That's just who he is like that kind of personality. Yeah. So that would also give us a chance to talk about it without like any more or less real stakes, because we don't want to lose the comedy in all this. We don't want it to be like super serious Austin Powers. We don't want to be the Last Jedi winking at the camera being like, you see what we did with Austin Powers?
But the funniest jokes are the ones that are real. Yeah. Like the ones that you can relate to. And I think that given that scenario, they could do a lot of really, really hilarious things with Austin Powers.
I think they could too. And that's why I kind of like Chris Pratt representing like modern Hollywood and like the future and like the super upstanding gentleman who's like awesome and really cool and everybody looks up to him, and Austin's like, you don't know as much as you think you do. Right. And then have Chris Pratt be like, well, you don't know as much as you think you do.
And you could get Nigel Powers in there at some point and have 3 generations.
Oh yeah, we got to have Nigel Powers in there.
Yeah, totally. And then they could talk Cockney to one another, and then the son be out of the loop on it again. That was also one of my favorite scenes where they were talking in the British slang that no one could understand around them, and it had the subtitles, but the subtitles went so fast that like you almost couldn't read them even as you were watching them.
Then we lost me marble.
Yes, that scene, exactly. Totally. I think that would be hilarious, and I love the fact that you're opening it up and positioning it to be something that's scalable and that we could move forward with in the future with a younger
and a guy who is clearly an action star, which is, I think, probably the way that Austin Powers movies are going to go. I don't think they're going to, because, I mean, even espionage movies in the 60s were a lot of like, let's get here and then we'll figure it out. But now it's like boom, 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 all over the world,
so
fight scenes, car chases. I mean, the new Mission Impossible went a million places. Tom Cruise was like in a helicopter shooting at Henry Cavill. They had a fight on a mountainside. So I think that's the way Austin Powers movies need to go. And I think Chris Pratt can handle that while still bringing the comedic chops to it that we know he has.
Yeah, I think it would be a good choice. I didn't even consider like who could potentially pick up that torch and run with it. I did have an inkling at one point where I was like, okay, you see young Austin and young Dr. Evil, so maybe there's some things we could do there and like learn their origin story, almost like a Magneto Xavier style like thing, which you would have to sort of look back and make sure that they were aware, I guess, because they went to the academy at the same time and all that, right? Yeah. And and Powers always beat them out.
Car was blown up when they were babies inside of it. Right. And they saved Austin, and then some like Dutch man or something picked up Dr. Evil from like on the side of an embankment.
Yeah, and I think that whoever that was had something to do with Gold Number 2. Because he was from, say it in your voice, from, where was he from? He said Dutchland, but he says it crazy, right?
Oh, I am from Holland. Isn't that weird?
Holland.
That's what it was.
That's what it was.
I was like, oh God, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what he says.
I just can't remember. Yeah. But the outrageousness of these movies and the 60s and the things that you can do bouncing back and forth in time, I think would be fantastic for a movie moving forward.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of thinking, because Basil has always been with Austin throughout all of this, so I would love to see like he set up, there was a plot in the 60s, and then like we could connect it together to like how he's going to stop the end of the world in like 21, 23 or something like that.
Right.
And so they have to go back in time from like all these different decades and places and like learn to work together as like the 60s, as old James Bond basically, and as a new James Bond basically.
Right.
What would they look like together? Because it would not be very harmonious.
Gotta have Burt Bacharach.
Oh yeah, Burt Bacharach's gonna come in.
Gotta play a solo.
I would love that, and I
point.
would love for Chris Pratt to be like, "What? How did you know he was there? Does he just? Why does he have his piano on the back of that truck? How did you know that?"
Yeah.
And like make fun of that. I would love that.
What the world needs now.
Yeah, I would love that. But yeah, that was my idea of what I thought I would like to see in an Austin Powers 4.
I like that. I like this whole thing of trying to come up with like future movies. I really enjoyed that exercise. And now that I sort of see the way you've done it, I think that if we do it again, I'll be able to come at it with a little bit more oomph behind it than just my like, oh God, how do I draw parallels between what I think I know I want to do with new movies and where'd we end up with old ones and, you know, all of that.
That's just what I was thinking. Like I was in the shower today before I come over here. And I knew I wanted to do something off like James Bond, and I was like, man, what would I do off like Daniel Craig James Bond? And I was like, Austin Powers would not be that dude. I was like, so there need to be a guy who represented him, but they would not get along.
But in even another thing too is like the big wide shots, and like it's a lot bigger feeling. Like new James Bond is almost like a Star Wars feel where everything's shot from a million miles away, you know?
Yeah.
And you just get these huge settings. Whereas a lot of the older movies were like, oh, you're at the bar now, you're in the room now, you're in the car now.
It's like it's world class now, where it's like fights and car chases and like all this stuff. Whereas in the old movies, it really was like, I've got to go to the bar and get intel. Yeah. And then that would be that for like 20 minutes.
Exactly.
He would just be in the bar getting intel. And
having a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
But now it's like in 20 minutes, like you said, he goes to 18 different countries. He's had 6 fights. He's been shot. And we figured out 3 twists.
Yeah, exactly. But that is so much closer to really how the movies are now. And the one thing I've always loved about the Austin Powers movies is they always really kind of hit the nail on the head with the stuff that they choose to pick on. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, the cars and the people and everything else from throwing a shoe. So it would be more difficult now, I feel like, to pick and poke at the new James Bond movies because even they have sort of turned their back to a lot of the stereotypical tropes of espionage movies. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we live in a world now where having a little tiny camera or a device that records audio isn't like a huge deal like it was back in those days. Everybody has it. So, gosh, could you imagine what they could do in the movie with just the single fact that everyone has a camera now? Yeah, like Austin Powers would have never fathomed that in a million years.
Yeah, but, and that's probably has to do with why these movies have developed into like the world, like the country jumping type things now, because like just getting intel from a bar would be like, okay, let me hack their phone and got their audio record. Okay, let's go to bed. It's recording. We'll hear everything they said tonight.
Yeah. Or you could have the major device that the bad guy, you know, wants to get or fires off be some sort of like EMP that takes down the whole world's grid and everyone goes back. And then all of a sudden you need Austin Powers because he's the only one left that remembers how things were done before all the new technology. So that could also be a bit of a plot.
Yeah, and that could be, I mean, that could be like what the end of the world is like that giant EMP that just like destroys everything.
But you've got to have something happen though so that it takes everyone back to the old days. And then Austin's all of a sudden like in his element again. And that would be cool in the future too if Basil makes it kind of like a pseudo 60s future. Right. And it's like the 60s but warped. Yeah. And so when Austin and Chris Pratt get there, somebody runs up to him and they're like, Austin, or they're like, sir, please, can I have some money? And he's like, oh, that's not groovy. You're dirty. Why are you so dirty? With his frills.
Yeah, with his little frills. He's like, oh, don't touch the frills.
God, how many people do you know were Austin Powers for like a decade
worth of
Halloween?
There's still, I mean, you walk into like it's not a big section. You can't get like accessories. But there are Austin Powers outfits in Halloween stores every year.
Oh yeah, you get the necklace with the little circle in the arrow out of it, whatever you call those things.
It was like the symbol for men.
Male and female.
Yeah, male and female.
Yeah.
And that's male.
That one is the male.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that if Austin Powers was to continue, that's a direction they should take. I also think that if they just wanted to make another 60s movie, it would be funny. I don't think it would be as well received. I think they kind of need to comment on the fact that Austin's living in this world where nobody would accept him. And but yeah, I also really enjoy this exercise. I hope we continue this. I liked this a lot.
For sure. And for what it's worth, Mike Myers, I believe himself, has come out quite a few times saying that he is still working on and still wants to do another Austin Powers.
Yeah.
So in theory, we could still see one someday, but it has been quite a while.
Yes, it has. And I would love to see one. I would love to see Austin Powers 4. I would love to see Wayne's World 3. I would love to see Shrek 5. I would not love to see The Love Guru 2.
No. Which that was still his last like leading role.
Yeah, that was like his last, or at least
live action.
Yeah, live action. He's just been doing like voiceover work.
Right.
He's appeared in some stuff. Like he was just in Bohemian Rhapsody, of all things, playing himself.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know how big of a role he has, but he was on like the press circuit. Like he was on Jimmy Kimmel Live or something talking about how he was in Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh wow.
So I don't know.
Just another reason I need to go see that movie.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if it's like a nod to Wayne's World and it's like Mike Myers telling them he wants to like use their song in Wayne's World or something. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know how big his role is, but he is definitely in it playing himself.
I mean, I still cannot hear Bohemian Rhapsody without seeing the blue gremlin that they're all piled into.
Banging their heads.
Banging their heads. Rhapsody. Yeah, so that actually does make a lot of sense, strangely, that he would be involved with that.
Yeah. But I guess that's it for this episode, unless there's anything else.
That wraps it up for me, man.
Yeah, it wraps it up for me too. Well, we're glad you guys tuned back in. Hopefully you also enjoyed this one since we were back in the same room together. And follow us on Instagram. I forgot last time. I always forget as I'm like leading out, and I forgot and was like getting mad at myself for forgetting for you for not being there to tell me I was forgetting. So please follow us on Instagram at ScruffyMovies
and Crockalicious.
And we hope to see you guys next week. We'll be coming back with another episode for you guys. And then we're going to start some Christmas episodes. We got something really, really, really fun that I've been looking forward to for a while that's going to come out on Christmas Eve, actually. And we are in the planning stages of that. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's going to be a lot of fun. But we hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please stick around for next week's, and we will see you all then.
Bye!